very granular. And I'll just share you some things, and you can decide what you see. But I'm intrigued by some of the things that I see. So let me just walk you through this very granular sophomore approach right now, because there is none. All right, so here's our map of the U.S. It looks kind of black, and it has a certain pattern. So fix those patterns in your head, and we're just going to do pattern association, okay? Epidemiology 101, geospatial relationships, okay? Now what we've done is we've just assigned the oil and gas well numbers here and color-coded them. And these are data that you can Google out and borrow out and start putting these interesting things together. And so you can see, yeah, there's hot and cold spots, right? Okay. Remember the pattern again, it supersedes the one you saw. There's our network, thanks to Fact Tracker. So we're tying all these pieces all together. So again, try to remember the patterns. You can kind of get a flow here, goes down, comes up through the Midwest, make your contours. And then let's get into just a subset, a simple set of cancers. I haven't gone through all of these yet. All cancers, lung cancer, GI, bladder. We'll finish running through the entire list. And right now, it's just going to be a simple association, but I think you can start to see some interesting things. And I just hardly started, okay? So another set. Of course, the fun little numbers, these are incidence now. This is per 100,000. So you've adjusted and controlled for the relative numbers in this case. And so you walk your way through, and you keep looking at these maps, and you go, there's some general patterns in a set of these. Now I can look at some other cancers, and it doesn't make sense to me, and others that may make sense to me based on what we know in systems kinds of effects from these kinds of toxins that we might be exposed to. So very granular, but intriguing. And when you start adding up the states and matching them to the activity, it's interesting. Okay? Let's think about another parameter. There has been for a very long time the issue, the United States is just losing ground in a number of areas, other than reading, writing, and arithmetic. We're having an unexplained loss in what we would consider infant mortality, preterm infant, premature babies, and the whole fetal issue is really a problem that is unexplained for many years. So let's just walk through and see. Here are the rest of the countries, and there's the United States, unfortunately, leading. We've actually become more of a developing country ranking right now. We're one of the worst developed countries. We're certainly one of the high energy using countries, so that's an interesting sort of mix as we start to walk through this. But that said, let's take a look at the same map and see what we know about that. Okay, here are the most active oil and gas wells in the state that is doing that for now quite a few years, and of course it's been increasing in shale plays, as we've heard. I will be sharing with you fetal death and premature fetal rates. You see those? Pretty interesting times. Same thing there. Okay. If we then superimpose on top of that injury, insult to injury, our injection wells, we're sitting in almost the same kind of pattern. So these do sit on top of each other in a very interesting way, including the very high hazard waste. And there are micro regions up here, of course, Texas and Dallas-Fort Worth and some of those other areas, that at a very subgranular level, you can certainly see some patterns that look interesting. So there's a lot of work to do. There's already some interesting hints. We've got a lot to do, but I certainly am intrigued by this first look. Infant mortality is a very important indicator. It's a very important sentinel. It's one of the things you look for very early to try to get a handle on, because all of those cells are very susceptible to all kinds of contamination and modification at many different levels. And we also are seeing, if I showed you the congenital birth defects on some of those for the last few years, we find a very interesting pattern as well. So, was that now that took me a little time to do, but have you ever seen it published? No, it's been from sitting there. So again, a graduate student could have done this on a weekend. So we got this issue, and the percentage of preterm births in the United States has risen since 1984 at 36%. That's kind of interesting, in a not very interesting way. And what I'd really like to know is those of you that know a little more about what might be going on in sense at all relative to what we're seeing. But things are going the wrong way in terms of this outcome. And so it's an unexplained case. And if you look at all the adjusted issues, it still doesn't have an explanation. So we'll leave that on the table and only say that the only other thing that I see expanding that has the geospatial distributions right now that interesting is S1. And certainly there are a number of pathways that could give us problems with that. And so those linkages are there. We need to, of course, start to really dig into this. And here's the activity that's gone on in that period. It certainly has been going on, so we'll see. Okay, so what do we see in Ohio? Again, thanks to Ted and a bunch of other maps, just sticking things together, very granular, very, very loose and granular. You saw all these dots. This Dallas Fort Worth, no, this is all Eastern Hampton, Ohio. So it's pretty tough to look at that. If this were out in the middle of Timbuktu, that'd be one thing, but we're sitting over major metropolitan areas, high concentrations of these animals. And of course, that's not a really good outcome. So we know a lot in Ohio. We've got some very major watersheds, and to the credit of some of our environmental groups over the last 20 years, there are a set of environmental reports that if you dig into those, you can find them. And you know when you read them, so you got a baseline, which is really good. But you know why you have the baselines? Because we drilled Ohio to death in the 1800s, and we stripped it of coal afterwards. And so then we went back, and now we're finishing the job, you know, at the next level. So the third time, you know, we're going to make sure we get you. But that said, the strip mining, the acid drainage issues, if you remember those days, I was swimming, or actually I was working in the west harbor of the Cuyahoga Basin when the river caught fire. So I remember it very well. I swam really fast, and I got out of the water. But I was actually there collecting samples to help Case Western Reserve, Cleveland State, and others learn about how the eutrophic lake was dying, and then the Dane River caught on fire. That made it way too interesting. So the point is, I became an environmentalist maybe that day. I don't know. I certainly was glad I'm talking to swim. But Ohio has these watersheds and has these data, and if you read them carefully, they are telling already a story of hundreds of miles of compromised waterways. Hundreds of miles. So it's already there. And my real concern is this history is not done giving itself, and it's been leaching already. I'm convinced of that. So we've got a lot of hydrogeology in the state, some really great data. I'll share some of that. Look at this here. We know where our surface water intakes are, watershed boundaries, water protected areas. We've got all of these things to start to pull together. We've got a drinking, let's see, this is the public water system surface areas. We've got, in addition, the non-community community systems. So we've got all of this data. We've got the priority drinking areas, the community and high-risk contamination outlines. And underneath there, we've got a lot of hydrogeology. So we know a lot about this place. And we've got all of this data. And when we start laying things on top, now this is from out of state, and this is part of the ecology survey that they've done over, I think, mid-90s, 2005 or so. But again, you start seeing some interesting patterns. And then we have our injectional pattern, which currently has to be really updated and is going to get even more busy. And there's, on top of that, these very nasty wells that are out there as well. And if I go back, you'll see they sometimes sit over interesting places. So, you know, we have a lot to do here. There's no question that we see lead, copper, trichloroethane, so on and so forth. All the stuff that we really would not like to see that are in there. There are definitely communities, many of these communities are poorly served financially, and the public health infrastructure is incredibly weak. And you've got reports that you can find where they were sort of writing and begging for grants and never got any money, and they have these very high incidences going on. So what you really don't know is what you don't know, to have a quote that we had earlier. We really have no idea yet what's going on in these communities. And it doesn't look too exciting. So yeah, the job is huge, and the problems are many right now. And so there, again, there's a lot to do. If you want to look at one watershed here, this is the Muskingum. Those are all the wells collectively in that area. And this Muskingum River watershed has got some problems. So, all right, on to the next part of my sort of thought and talk. I was at this meeting here at the IOM. I don't know if maybe you were at that one. But you know, what we've all been sort of saying, John, the senior advisor of public health at MAH, you know, pretty much said it right there, is that you know, we really don't know a lot of stuff. And I'm going to get at why we don't know some of that. And that's really what's probably the most disturbing for me in this systemic sort of issue. We have a couple of other cases where we certainly know, and these are other cases where EPA inside information has been coming out, and certainly along with the SEC filings that I believe have really the most relevant data in it. And I believe I learned that through Debbie's work, that in SEC filings, whenever you do anything, you need to disclose lots of things to your potential investors, way more than you would disclose to anyone else. You've got to get those investors happy. And when you read those, that's where you really go for information, and there's completely listed all of those risks. They have to all be put, and they're all put, and they knew that they were there. So they know that this is a dirty industry that needs a lot of work. And certainly, as Bernie was saying, yeah, let's try to improve the technology, great, but let's not experiment on it.